Welcome to the webinar, 10 Ways AI is Helping Deal with the Coronavirus Pandemic and What Are the Implications for Pharma. So, things have changed in terms of our work life now. So, it's really changed the way we interact with our teams and how we do our work. So, you'll see on the screen, this is quite a familiar scene for all of you these days because everyone is working from home during coronavirus. But you must be very careful when you're working from home, as this video will show.
La parte de CISAT ya quedó, ya solamente tenemos que registrar autonomía curricular y el área socioemocional de los niños, porque esa parte está quedando bien. Perdón.
Things happen in life, and our new way of working means we need to think a little bit differently about a lot of things. So in terms of the impact on pharma, if you think through the way we do our manufacturing, it's traditionally been a global effort, with China and India really establishing themselves as the main players, particularly with respect to the active pharmaceutical ingredients. Now, when China shut the factories, and India also did, it meant that we had an impact on the supply chain because the drugs weren't being manufactured. India also banned the export of many active pharmaceutical ingredients, which means that the drugs that need these APIs can't get them. So even if the drugs are manufactured in other countries, if they don't get the APIs because they can't get them out of India or China, then that's going to cause issues down the supply chain. Now, big pharmaceutical companies have a certain amount of stock, say maybe 6 months of stock that they can rely on, but smaller ones have more difficulty because they can't keep that kind of stock level. On top of that, some smaller pharmaceutical companies were really worried about staying in business because it was having an impact on them being able to deliver their product. Also, I noticed when speaking with some clients that clinical trials for non-life-saving drugs have been put on hold, but patients have had a lot of difficulty getting some specific drugs. For example, my aunt has lupus, and one of the drugs for lupus is hydrochloroquine, a version of that, and she couldn't get it because there was that rumor going around that was endorsed by numerous people that it had an impact on COVID. Now, clearly that was unfounded and there didn't appear to be any evidence or scientific basis for that claim. But nonetheless, a lot of doctors were prescribing it for people and stocks became so tight that they really had difficulty getting any for the actual patients that needed the drug. So this is something that we would not have considered. You think of the whole stockpiling thing in pretty much every country. Toilet paper got stockpiled and, weird things like that. But you don't think of drugs being stockpiled, but they were. And so on top of that, the industry has been tasked, of course, with finding new drugs and vaccines to solve these challenges. Now, there's many ways that AI has been used in the COVID pandemic, and I will go through quite a few of these. So the first way is actually to identify, track and forecast outbreaks. As you may or may not know, Blue Dot, which is an AI company, was the first to give notification about the COVID outbreak, and they actually notified people before the CDC or World Health Organization knew about it. And so their intelligence came because they had a data set that had over 40 pathogen-specific data sets reflecting disease motility and outbreak potential. And so it really quantifies the risk of exposure, and then it analyzes big data with AI to really look at billions of flight itineraries, real-time climate conditions, health system capability, animal and insect population, all sorts of information like that. So AI was then used with this to give real-time alerts about your exposure based on where you were at that point in time. So it allowed you to perform advanced and higher quality risk assessments in less time because it had over 100 diverse data sets, including global air travel data, peak time disease surveillance data, and a whole heap of other things. So this obviously would be incredibly useful for airlines to know about, how at risk their staff might be, and so on. So this is a very interesting initial way that AI has been used in this situation. A second way has been to actually detect and diagnose COVID-19. Among the tens of thousands of cases detected, several cases are asymptomatic. Although the most common symptoms are fever and a dry cough, people might also get headaches or shortness of breath and may not have the typical symptoms, and some people are completely asymptomatic. Quite a few companies were developing AI systems to really diagnose the severity of it from chest x-rays and make predictions using automatic x-ray analysis to support radiologists. So one company that I found is Radlogics, and they are achieving 98% accuracy in their diagnosis from the system, which is very useful for identification and monitoring and predicting patient status. Another company is Demo, which is from Alibaba. You may know Alibaba Group because they're a big Chinese technology company and they have many subsidiaries, and this is one of their subsidiaries. So they have a research group called Damo Academy, and it can diagnose suspected cases of COVID-19 within 20 seconds with 96% accuracy. They are basically already using it in numerous hospitals in China, and at the time that I researched this, it had already diagnosed over 30,000 cases. So it was trained on 5,000 confirmed coronavirus cases, and like the previous system I mentioned, Radlogics, it also tracks treatment and responses, such as detecting improvement and reduction in white mass in lung. And they're also working with partners to be able to put that into the cloud, where medical staff can automatically upload chest x-rays and CT scans with their smartphones or laptops and get instant results. So that's a great application, and you can see how this application would actually be quite useful in non-COVID times for radiologists. If you think about the UK system for looking at x-rays and radiologists, there is a centre in one part of the country where most of the NHS x-rays get sent for analysis, and it takes a long time for it to then get done and then get sent back. So it would be amazing and speed up these kind of things, diagnostic procedures, if it was automated in the cloud, and it would be within seconds. So it would be an amazing thing to make available in other instances as well. And then there's the surveillance system for using face recognition technology in China. I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's cameras everywhere like there are in every other country, and they have face recognition technology in that, so they can really monitor the population. It was a very interesting documentary by the BBC where a BBC journalist went to China, and as an experiment they told the Chinese authorities that he was a suspected criminal and needed to be picked up. And so his task in this documentary was to evade the cameras. He did his best, he covered his face, he kept doing what he could to evade any cameras, but he was picked up and detained within 15 minutes. So it's a very efficient system for finding people, but now what they have done is added a new component to that, so they could detect with each person if they have a fever or not, and if they have a fever, therefore are more likely to have the virus, so they can pinpoint who people are with fevers throughout the country. So they have added this to the smart helmets that the police are using as well. So you can see an image here of a police smart helmet in China, and the camera can then detect from each person that is in camera range of that person what their body temperature is and whether they are likely to have fever. So if their body temperature is above the average body temperature, then it can detect that and they can be given help. Another way is obviously to treat COVID-19. So there are several companies that are AI companies that have been looking at this. So Deargen in South Korea was one, and it actually was looking at predicting which drugs out of ones that are already FDA approved were ones that would be likely to have a high probability of being able to treat successfully COVID-19. One of the ones they predicted very early on was remdesivir. So that one actually wasn't approved yet for it, but it was put in clinical trials very quickly. But then tazanavir, which is an HIV medication, as is remdesivir, also was predicted to be most likely to bind to it and be useful. They are an AI pure play, so they did need pharmaceutical partners to bring any novel compounds that they came up with, which they came up with a few, to life. In silico medicine also, instead of looking at it to repurpose existing drugs, they took a different tack. And so they really then used AI to generate tens of thousands of novel molecules with the potential to bind a specific SARS-CoV-2 protein and block the virus's ability to replicate. So they then had a deep learning filtering system and narrowed it down to 100 molecules after 4 days. They actually already have a pharmaceutical partner for 2, but there could be others that they're seeking partners for. SRI Biosciences and Ictos are 2 companies that have joined forces in this. Ictos have a deep learning model that really designs virtual novel molecules, while SRI have Synfini, which is an automated synthetic chemistry platform that figures out the best way to make a molecule and then makes it. So with their powers combined, and their systems can actually design, make and test new drug-like molecules in 1 to 2 weeks. And then Benevolent AI, they identified 6 compounds, and of those 6, baricitinib, which is for rheumatoid arthritis, amongst many other things, looks like the best of the group for both safety and efficacy against COVID and SARS-CoV-2 protein. Currently, ruxolitinib, which is a drug that works by similar mechanism, is in clinical trials for COVID-19. Another area that AI is being used here is to assist these supply chain disruptions that I mentioned in the beginning. There's a lot of data sources that could actually help companies manage supply, quality, and cost because of the real-time data availability. So we could go from shop floor to the patient and collect data from internal and external sources, even things like weather patterns, because that can affect shipping and all sorts of things. AI can automatically generate a supply chain map showing the details about an order and metrics like the quantity and the delivery date, and then it can deliver highly accurate recommendations and predictions based on machine learning and data science. And it's not really simple rules-based, available to promise kind of calculations. This is proper prediction. And then it can also do analytical decision-making, can predict the hurdles and recommend solutions from real-time big data. It can also do demand planning from real-world data, risk assessments, and rapid replanning if required. And then supply chain management. Pharma tend to take about 75 days for replenishment, whereas AI can model automation to accurately predict whether a given order could be consolidated with another upcoming order to the same location or department. Inventory management. AI-based inventory management can determine which product is most likely to be needed and how often, and track exactly when it's delivered to a patient, and provide time and delays or incidents that might trigger replacement shipment within hours. And then warehouse automation. This is used in lots of industries. So it's really integrating AI into warehouse automation tools, which will then speed communications, reduce errors in things like pick and pack settings. And at its simplest, it can predict which items will be stored the longest and position them accordingly. So there's two companies I'm just going to call out here, which are doing very interesting things with using AI in supply chain management. So Merck is one, and they are utilizing harmonized real-time information, everything from supply chain performance to stock keeping units to data collected from the company's ERP to optimize its operations. By placing sensors throughout its supply chain that gather data about inventory, distribution practices, and availability for every unit, Merck Serono has end-to-end visibility. The data set helps them to process orders in the possible shortest time, enabling shift production of materials to different locations as needed. And with forecasting, AI and the algorithms basically applied to the data allow them to forecast more accurately than traditional tools and humans in 80% of their predictions. So this example reflects how the industry is shifting to technological advancements that can not only offer the full picture of a company's supply chain, but also suggestions on how that company can move inventory smartly and make much more intelligent supply chain decisions. Novartis is another one doing some interesting things here. So they are really using blockchain. What they're doing is designating every entity in their supply chain to a decentralized identifier using blockchain. So it's encrypted and unchangeable. So these are managed with digital certificates and based on global standards, W3C and DIF. So the issuer creates the credential. For example, an example of thinking of this is the university providing a transcript for a student. The owner countersigns the credential. So in this case, say it would be the student, it's their transcript. And then the user, for example, an employer, verifies the credential. So the entities are then registered by trusted users into blockchain and then issued to identity holders who then release it to a potential requester. The credentials are then verified against the underlying blockchain network to verify and qualify the supplier. So this was discussed in a conference by pharma quite recently about how they did this. It was a really interesting case study. So another way is in processing health claims data. Now, Ant Financial, you may not be surprised, is yet another AI subsidiary of the Alibaba Group. So they actually have been working in this space for a while. It's not only the clinical operations of healthcare systems that are being taxed, but also the business and administrative divisions as they deal with the surge of patients. So a blockchain platform that was offered by Ant Financial helps speed up claims processing and reduces the amount of face-to-face interaction between patients and hospital staff using AI. Again, this is something that would be very useful outside of the COVID situation. And then a sixth way is AI-powered drones are delivering medical supplies to patients. I'm going to show you an example of this. Did you notice the clock on the wall? It shows you that there's such a short amount of time between blood being drawn and the results being back, whereas in today's age, without that, that can take days to weeks. Okay, so another way is robots to sterilize medical equipment. So rather than a team of cleaners going in and using disinfectant wipes on everything, the robots can go in and they have a laser light that will just beam over everything and sterilize everything automatically. AI to detect non-compliance. So another way is that the Chinese government were using was a monitoring system called Health Code, and that used big data to identify and assess the risks of each individual based on their travel history, how much time they've spent in virus hotspots, and their potential exposure to people carrying the virus. So citizens were assigned a color code, which was red, yellow, and green, traffic light system, and then they could access that via WeChat or Alipay to indicate if they need to be quarantined or allowed in public. And I've put a link there to an article about that if you're interested in reading about it. I also think this has some other applications that could be used in other disease conditions as well. Chatbots. So Tencent have WeChat, and people can really access free online health consultation services through it. Obviously, chatbots have been an essential communication tool for many service providers in numerous industries, but particularly in travel and tourism, when this first started to know where people were going to be disrupted. World Health also have a WhatsApp version which was distributing information and you could ask it questions. And then supercomputers are working on prevention. So the cloud computing resources in supercomputers of several major tech companies, including Tencent, Didi, and Huawei, are being used by researchers to fast-track the development of a cure or vaccine for the virus. The speed that these systems can run calculations and model solutions is so much faster than any standard normal business process in computers. So Moderna Therapeutics use AI to accelerate this process, and they actually jumped ahead of the queue of all the other vaccine developments with a preclinical trial that was started in late April in Seattle. So this was 20 to 25 healthy volunteers to see if the vaccine produced an immune response. The subsequent testing of this would still need to be done in large-scale trials if it was to get approval. So even if it gets proved effective in the initial trials, there will still need to be larger human trials before it will get wider approval to be used. Okay, so there's 10 different ways that AI is being used in this current COVID pandemic. If you have any questions on these, or if you have any interest in thinking through the use of some of these post-COVID for other applications, just drop me an email. My email is abates, abates, @eularis.com, or just pop into the forums and ask any questions there. I'm in that every day. Okay, thanks.